guys in for tonight. Okay, how many people in this audience have seen The Housemaid before? Okay, I think that's like 4 people. Okay, this is great. A couple of years ago, I discovered this film 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember. I was invited to come to London to be a keynote speaker for the Korean International Film Festival in London, put on by the Korean Cultural Center there. And they were inviting a lot of Korean filmmakers to participate in this, and the theme was Noir. So that's how I got my entree into all of this, because I really knew nothing about Korean noir, or even that much about Korean cinema, besides the obvious stuff we're seeing today. Because these days, South Korea is one of the hotbeds of creative cinema in the world. In fact, South Korea is a country that its national slogan now is Creative Korea. That's how much they think about themselves as artists in that country, which is kind of amazing if you can imagine the United States adopting such a slogan as our national motto. That's not going to happen right now. I got news for you. So it was a fascinating experience, and I met all these Korean filmmakers, and it was really uncomfortable because I couldn't speak Korean, and they really didn't speak English, and they were very nervous about speaking English. And then we were all sitting together at dinner, and nobody was saying anything at all. And then my wife was with me, and then finally her phone rang, and this is her ringtone. And all the Korean guys went, "Oh, Al Green! Oh, love and happiness! All right!" That's why we do this cross-cultural stuff, right? Because then you find out, oh, and then we were off to the races, and then everybody was buddies, and it was all fantastic from then on. In preparation for that event, they sent me a DVD of the movie that you were about to see. And I wish that my wife had photographed me watching the film. Because she said, "I have never seen these expressions on your face before when you're watching a movie. I'm one of these guys. But this movie, I was one of these guys." So, that's very sophisticated film criticism. But then I've learned quite a bit about this film. It was last night when I showed those Czech films and talked about the Czech New Wave, and how there was a feeling of liberation in Prague and in all of Czechoslovakia in the 1960s. The same thing kind of happened in South Korea. Syngman Rhee, the strongman, the American-backed strongman who was running Korea since the end of World War II, was deposed in a bunch of student protests. And all of a sudden in 1960, Korean culture sort of opened up a little bit. And Kim Ki-yoon, the filmmaker whose movie you're about to see, had participated. He cut his chops as a filmmaker because he had worked for the United States Information Service in Korea after the war. And he was making US-backed propaganda films, basically. And when they stopped that, they kind of dumped all the equipment. And he scavenged the equipment and the film stock, and that's how he started learning to make his own movies. He had a very, very artistic background, came from a very artistic family, but always divided his life like, well, that's all well and good, but I need to go to medical school. He one time was going to be a dentist, he was going to be a doctor, but finally, after this gig, he had the materials, and he started making films, and the die was cast. And then, with the opening up of the culture in 1960, he gave sort of free rein to his weird predilections, which you are going to see full-blown in this movie. This film was a huge and controversial success in Korea. My understanding is that when this film played, they just packed the auditoriums show after show after show, and the audience reacted in a way that Korean audiences never reacted before. Very often with shouts of, "Kill the housemaid!" You will come to understand why. But it was fascinating. The other thing I love about Kim Ki-young is that he married a woman in 1955 who did have a medical practice. She was a dentist, and a very, very successful one. And as my good buddy Hyun-Jin Cho, who invited me to that festival in London, would say, she pulled a lot of teeth in order for this guy to make the movies that he wanted to make. And he always gave credit to her as being the woman behind my success, because it was her work that allowed me to make the films I want to make. And then later on, he would joke when they invited him to film festivals, and then she would see the film and say, "My God, what have you done with my money?" And in a classic noir fashion, you know, he made a bunch of these fantastic movies in the 1960s. The Housemaid is really the first of a trilogy of films. Called, the next one we made in '71 is called Woman on Fire. And then he made one in the early 80s called Woman on Fire '82. Guess what year that was released? And, but nothing really matches the films that he made in the 1960s. He is now revered amongst younger Korean filmmakers. Yes, Bong Joon-ho cites The Housemaid, and Kim Ki-young is the major influence on his career as a filmmaker. Park Chung-ho is the same thing. You know, he is so admired, and sadly, when all that cultural revolution in Korea was crushed again, the films really were kind of buried, and his career was unknown outside of Korea for decades, until it was rediscovered in the 1990s, and he was invited to go to all of these international festivals and be celebrated. But sadly, he and his wife, who he was with his entire life, died in a house fire just before going to one of these festivals in Berlin, I think it was. And he never really got to enjoy the recognition and the respect of these young filmmakers that he clearly has. And all credit goes to Martin Scorsese and the Film Foundation. Their World Cinema Project has restored many of his movies, and this one foremost among them. So what you are going to see is largely thanks to Scorsese and the Film Foundation. So that's it. I'm not going to say anything more except prepare yourselves. Because seriously, I mean, this movie goes, Korean noir shades toward horror. That's like a cultural thing there, right? So this movie starts out as a domestic drama. It starts to become a crime film. It veers dark, like noir dark. Then it starts to go into Grand Guignol horror territory. And I'm not going to say anything more about it, but you would not see this movie on an American movie screen in 1960. There's no way. So, fasten your seatbelts. Here comes The Housemaid.